Going to talk about jQuery. The title of the talk here officially is your second look at jQuery, and then like subtitled. And if it's your first look, what took you so long? For most of you, I'm sure it's at least your second look because what, 3 years ago, Jason spoke on it in Fort Lauderdale. Not only has jQuery come a long way since then, but the JavaScript engines that are in the browsers that we have available are also, they've improved a lot. And really just what web developers' idea of what we can or ought to do with JavaScript has improved since then. jQuery, I think at first, and in many firms' eyes still, it was useful for doing lightboxes and fading or sliding content around on the page to have like subtle little hover fades and things like that. And it is really good at that stuff. It's not at all what I'm going to be covering today. I am essentially going to be talking about two main things. And one is how to get content in and out of your pages using XML HTTP request or XHR. And then another thing that I'm going to go over is something that comes up on the lasso list all the time, which is, can I get a lasso variable into JavaScript? Can I get a JavaScript variable back into lasso? I'm going to be showing how to do that in a way that doesn't fill your JavaScript up with like square brackets. And I'm going to show at least one way to communicate between lasso and your JavaScripts using XHR and throwing the data back and forth using JSON. So, first place I will go is cover XHR content loads. You can see that on this page we've got some links to cats and dogs and back to the home page, and then we'll eventually set the number of hobos. Right now we'll just go to cats, and then I'll go to dogs. And one thing that's been not always apparent to people trying to do navigations only through XHR is how to allow the back button to work and the forward button. What we're doing here is, and I will show code here in a bit, essentially this system uses everything after the hash to know what content to load. And when the system, the JavaScript has I've got a polling thing in place essentially. It sets up a set interval, and every 100 milliseconds the poller sees if that hash has changed, and if so, it loads new content. In a robust system, of course, there would be lots of traps and exceptions and things like that. But at its most basic, that is what's happening. When I change this to something else, the system senses the change and that kind of thing. So then the back button, because the browser will put hash stuff into the browser's history. You know, if the hash is no different than navigating around inside a page. You've probably used anchors within a page since 1998 to skip to main content or in the table of contents, those kind of things. Those links within a page the browser puts in the history. So you can jump back and forth in a really long scrolling page where there are inline anchors. And we're just leveraging that here so that the browser saves the history state and the poller updates the content as the hash changes. Yeah, so I'll cover right now some of how to do that. Let's see, I probably just want to close all of these. Okay, here's the polling. Can you guys see the text? Should I increase the size of that?
Yeah, increase.
How about the coloring? Will that be okay, or should I? There's not nearly as much contrast over here.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. I'm also gonna. It may help too. Okay. This is my polling.js. It lives. It lives here in the LDC09 theme, and it is a script that is auto-loaded with, settable exceptions. Every page in the site will get this polling script loaded, and in it right now we've got some functions. We've got this navigation manager. And it simply sees what the hash is last time and what it is now. It's got a function that has init, which sets those things, and a function for check hash, which compares them. And if the one does not equal the other, it runs a primary content load. That's questions about where we're at so far. I mean, I just went over it in like pseudocode, but it's fairly simple. This is a function that has you can think of it, if you haven't built JavaScript functions that do this, roughly you can think of this as a type in Lasso 8 that has tags that you can call. So in here we've got init and check hash. And then down here we tell it when somebody asks for init to return init, and when they ask for check hash, we return check hash. Using these, we can also make our internal method names different than the external method names and that kind of thing. I set a variable to navigation manager, which is, I keep pointing at my screen, which is this. And then I call it and I initialize it. Then I say that this global timer callback is also a function where I call this detect wake from sleep and the navigation manager's check hash function. Now I've got this hobo timer callback also. Now, detect wake from sleep, I'm going to gloss over. Essentially, what it does is allows the polling to stop if you navigate away from the browser for a while, and then pick back up when it senses you're back in your browser.